Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. I am your host, Al Richards, and today is Casual Friday. I'm in a hoodie. It looks like our guest Brandon's in a hoodie, so man, we're all good. Today, Brandon and I, our guests, we are going to be talking about the impact of substance abuse. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners can definitely grab a hold of that and understand. I was going over Brandon's bio, and he's got one heck of a bio. And again, this is what I love about doing these shows is hearing people's stories. And I know everyone that comes on, Brandon included, they're going to change someone's life. And I definitely know that for a fact. And all it takes is one person, and it's that ripple effect. It'll just continue to grow from there. So, Brandon, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to be here, and a huge thank you to your lovely wife for reaching out to me and going, "Hey, I think my husband needs to be a guest on your show," or something like that. So, please tell her thank you from me.
I will, and thanks. I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on your show.
Absolutely. So, gosh, Brandon, I mean, you've been through some crap, my friend, and I believe you may be either the second or the third guest I've had in a little over 2.5 years, where actually really the military pretty much saved them, got them
Yeah,
away from their past life. But
yeah,
before we go into that, I mean, just let our audience know a little bit about you, and we'll just start
sure,
the journey from there.
sure, you bet. Well, thanks again, Al. Yeah, my name is Brandon Johnson. I'm a recovering addict, and I'm a therapist. I'm a licensed therapist in the state of Utah. I've been practicing. Let's see, I graduated from the University of Utah in 2011, master's in social work, and I've been practicing ever since. And yeah, and I'm an addict in recovery, and my story with that, we could probably get into that in a few minutes, but yeah, led me to being in the military, and being in the military, I served two tours overseas, two tours overseas, in Operation Iraqi Freedom, and spent a total of about 3 years overseas in a combat zone.
Holy cow. Well, before we go any further, thank you so much for your service. And I mean
My
that
pleasure.
seriously. Uh, you guys are the ones that's helped make this country awesome and protected all of us. So I tip my hat off to those first responders and people in our military for keeping us safe. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I would second what you said, and I have a lot of respect for military and those who served, and police and first responders, those who sacrifice so much for our freedoms. Means a lot to me too.
Yeah. So thank you very much. So how long did you battle the addiction, and what started it for you? I mean, is it an early age? Like a lot of our guests, it seems like right around the puberty is when it starts hitting, right? At like the 11, 12, 13.
Yeah, mine was a little bit later. I was probably about 15, 16 years old.
Okay.
Um, just being a teenager, being a knucklehead, making bad decisions, and started drinking a little bit here and there. Started smoking weed a little bit here and there, and yeah, I think it was about my senior year in high school. Um, One of my friends got in a car accident and gotten hurt pretty bad, but the doctor had prescribed him a whole bunch of these really cool pain medicines, and
Oxy.
yeah, uh-huh.
Imagine that.
Yeah, you know all about that story. Anyway, that was kind of the beginning of the oxy thing back in the mid '90s, and yeah, I got him. I remember taking some oxy back then and thinking, wow, this is nice. I like this, and that led me down a road of about 2 to 3 years of opiate addiction. And yep. And anyway, that was as people have been through opiate addiction, other addictions, know. I mean, got into a lot of bad situations, a lot of bad choices, breaking the law, doing those kinds of things, and got caught up with some things. Watched a few friends overdose and die. I ended up in jail a time or two, got in trouble. And I had some other friends who got locked up and put away for long periods of time. And anyway, it was about that time 9/11 happened as well. And anyway, so I had kind of a just this, sense of duty, a patriotic duty. I felt like I wanted to go and serve and do something with my country at the time. And I was also watching, my friends and what was going on around me. And I figured I was going to end up in jail or dead myself if I didn't do something. I reached out to the military and somehow I got in. They let me in. I told them my story. I told them where I was at, and yeah, I got in, and they let me in. And 2 months later, I was in basic training.
Holy cow.
So
So even during your addiction, you said that you started losing some friends. I mean, that didn't open your eyes at all to just go, okay, man, something's got to change.
yeah, a lot of things tried to open my eyes. I mean, I would say that's the power of addiction. I got a abscess and almost had to cut my arm off because I got an infection, and that didn't stop me. Um, I died a couple twice. I overdosed and was brought back, resuscitated by my friends. Luckily, they
Wow.
brought me back to life. And yeah, a couple of friends, car crashes, accidents, falling asleep at the wheel, stuff like that. Couple overdose deaths. Um, it was yeah, power of addiction. I should have, I had a lot of I would say rock bottoms or scary moments, and and the power of addiction kept me coming back. And um you know
I like how you just said, Brandon, you hit a lot of rock bottoms,
hmm
because I think the majority of us out here in the world believe that, because even at the depths of my wife's addiction, people would say, well, I guess she hasn't hit rock bottom yet.
right.
However, what they don't realize is there's another rock bottom. Then there's another one below that. And there's another one below that. It just depends on how long you want to keep digging, right?
Yeah, as long as you're holding the shovel, you're gonna keep hitting a new bottom.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, I had a friend that I interviewed, Tamara, in Canada. Very lovely lady. She's been on the show a few times, and she said she woke up after being passed out from a party, laying on her living room floor, and her dog's laying there looking at her. And she's like, what am I doing? And she goes,
Mhm.
that very moment is when she decided to drop the shovel and stop digging. Because she goes, every time she thought she hit the lowest part of her life, she found out there was another part that was even lower than the one she thought was the low one.
Mhm. Yep. And anyway, I also I struggled to find help. I was searching for it, and I was asking for it. Eventually, when I did ask for help, and I had a hard time finding it. This was in the late '90s. Um, my my family didn't have a lot of money. I didn't have any money, and there wasn't a lot of facilities where you could get help and treatment if you couldn't pay for it.
Yeah.
There was a few state funded programs. I happened to get a bed in a state funded facility for a detox, and so it was, it was cost effective.
Yeah.
And that was really my first chance at recovery. You know, I detox, and I met with some professionals and got some counseling and help kind of the first time. Kind of helped me dig into what was underneath my addiction, what was driving it, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm very grateful for that, and for the people, you know, that helped me to get a chance to have a chance to find sobriety and to get sober and to start to understand the disease of addiction, you know. I just thought that I was a broken, messed up person, and there was no use of, you know, there was no help for me because I was broken.
Yeah. And a lot of my guests have said that exact same thing, right? That they just felt like they were broken. It was a lost cause. And
Right.
unfortunately, I think that's why there are so many that end up taking their life because of that, right? Because they just don't see any other way out. And society doesn't help with that at all. Because
No.
I mean, there are a lot more facilities out there now. There's
Now there's a
help
lot, and
now.
luckily now insurance helps out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
uh,
somewhat. I
some
still have a
insurance
bad taste
helps
in my
more than
mouth.
they ever have before. Let's put it that
There
way.
you go.
Yep.
There you go. Yeah, because I do have a bad taste in my mouth with the insurance companies, because we're leaving the lives of our loved ones in the hands of the insurance companies. Because Brandon, it doesn't take 30 days, it doesn't take 60 days, it doesn't take 90 days. Hell, it doesn't even take 6 months. That journey is a lot longer, and
Right.
not wanting to pay. So where else do they go, right? I mean,
Mhm.
they're in and out of recovery centers for, I think my wife went through 8 of them, and I've heard people on the show say they went through so many they can't even count how many that they went through.
Right.
And it's because the insurance only gave them 30 days or 60 days, and then they were back out, and they still didn't have the tools, or their brain still hadn't had a chance to plug in new neurons and healthy neurons to get them going down the right path.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. You know, I see in working with recovering addicts, you know, it is a process. The change process takes time, period. As human beings, we are habitual creatures, we are habitual animals, and changing habits is difficult. Stopping habits is difficult, right?
Yeah.
And so the habit that as addicts we focus on is using behavior, but in recovery we have to relearn all kinds of new behaviors, because all the behaviors that we were doing as addicts are addict behaviors. So from morning to night, from time we got up till the time we got to bed, was all unhealthy. You know, the way we were living, thinking, functioning, interacting with people, connecting with the world, not connecting with the world, it was all part of the disease, you know. And
Yeah.
so it's to relearn how to, kind of like the crawl, walk, run kind of thing, you know. I have to relearn how to live sober, crawl, walk, run. It takes time, process.
Yeah. Gosh, I never really looked at it that way. That is a really good analogy, because really that's what it's like. I mean, you're almost a newborn again,
Yeah, I
in
mean,
all
if
honesty.
I lived 5, 6, 7, 8 years of my life with this lens over my eyes of addiction, then it's gonna take me a while to relearn how to live in all areas of my life.
Yeah. Doing what you are doing now as a therapist,
Hmm.
going back and look at your life when your addiction was first starting,
Sure.
was it trauma? Do you think you was covering up some stuff, some trauma in your life?
I'm glad you brought that up. As far as mental health and substance abuse, because substance abuse hardly ever stands alone as a singular problem for somebody. Um, you know, usually co-occurring mental health disorders, anxiety, depression, trauma, go along with substance abuse, and or substance abuse will lead to developing anxiety and depression and those kinds of things. So yeah, my story, and looking back at me, I remember I got in trouble with the law. I got arrested for underage drinking, and they made me go to these classes, these required classes from the state, um and I went and I interviewed with this person. And then I was an 18-year-old kid. I remember 17, 18 years old. I remember sitting down talking to them. They asked me a bunch of questions, and then the lady who was interviewing looked at me and she said, "You shouldn't be here." And I said, "Well, I'm here. You made me be here. I don't want to
Right.
be here." And she goes, "No, I mean, you don't fit the criteria." And I said, "Well, what do you
Huh.
mean?" She said, "You're from a middle class family. Your parents are married. You're white, you know, this, that, and the other." And she goes, "You don't fit the criteria of a substance abuse client or whatever." And I was an 18-year-old kid, and I was a little thrown off by that. And I was like, "Well, and I guess I shouldn't be here." And then I left.
Yeah.
But I thought about that years and years and years later, um, because why did I have this, problem and underlying issues and all that? And for me, it was anxiety. I had struggled with anxiety a lot as a kid. There was a time where I went to the hospital because I was so nervous about going to junior high, just going to school and showing up, that I had to go to the hospital.
Wow.
I froze up, I locked up, I couldn't move, I couldn't talk, like a 12-year-old kid. So my anxiety about a lot of stuff is what drove my addiction.
Yeah, because I'm sure once you took that first pill or that first drink, that subsides, right? Because I've heard that so many times from guests, and it was the same way for me too, right? Like the first time I did my first line
Hmm.
of cocaine, I was
Yeah.
like, oh my heck, this is freaking awesome, right?
Yeah. And like,
I I,
oh,
I feel
and for me, it
completely.
was the ability to be calm. I had never felt calm before.
Wow.
Oh, calmness, and that feels nice. Woo, I like that.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, some of us out there, we can keep calm, right? Other people, they have that struggle, and then they take something, whether it's ice cream or gambling or sex
Hmm.
or whatever, and all, or drugs and alcohol, and it calms them down. I mean, how could you not fall into that trap? I mean,
Yeah.
again, how could you not? Because you feel so at peace.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And yeah, it comes, and then inactive addiction, what I see, obviously myself, my story, and with working with others, is control, power and control, right? Um, it's a loss of power and control when you develop addiction, right? And then you're trying to control this thing you can't control, the never ending cycle.
Yeah. Here's another question for you. You go into the military takes you.
Hmm.
You go and you serve a couple tours. I can't imagine, and I don't know what part you was in. I can't imagine being out there, being shot at, having a chance of somebody killing you, just always have to be at the top of your game. To me, for someone like me, I would think the stress of it all would put me back into that addiction, because I would think that anxiety that you battled with as a young man would escalate even more because of what's happening around you.
Yeah. I For me, my experience in the military was, number one, it was it was a detox, and it was a recovery, and it was a chance to learn to live sober. Um, I when I went into basic training, I weighed about 165 pounds. I'm a pretty big guy. I'm like 6'2", and I was very frail. I was very skinny. I was sick, and dope sick
Yeah.
for many years. But when I graduated basic training, I was 215 pounds. So I gained almost 50 pounds in 3.5 months of just being healthy.
Probably solid muscle though as well.
Yeah. So, so for me, I learned a lot about resiliency. I learned a lot about um, determination and will and willpower, through, I guess, through experience, just experiential learning is very powerful, very, very powerful. I also, I may come back to this later, but I worked as a wilderness therapist
Okay.
for many years, helping people, again, addiction recovery, mental health. But yeah, the power of experiential therapy, being pushed out of your comfort zone, um, and kind of stripped down all the things of life that used to matter that don't anymore.
Right.
A chance to really reset and really kind of look at what matters and what doesn't, on a very personal and internal level.
Yeah. Do you, going through the experiences that you've gone through and getting your degree, becoming a therapist yourself,
Hmm.
are do you dig right into the person's, I mean, do you get below the scabs? Because and the reason why I'm asking that is because for recovery, from what I've learned from it, it has to start from within, not on the outside of things. It has to come from within. It's, what's it's like having a deep infection, right? And it's getting you sick, but yet it's inside and you can't see it until you go to the doctors and they do all these tests.
Hmm.
Is that the direction that you go when you have someone that comes in that's battling addiction, is sit down with them and just kind of dig deep and get yourself under the skin inside so you can figure out which direction to go from there?
Um, in my opinion, working with clients and how I approach clients, and whether it's addiction or whatever they're struggling with, is that they're the experts on their lives, not me. And so I need them to lead me. I need them
Right,
to lead
right.
me on their path of recovery. Where are you at on your recovery? What are you looking for? What do you need? And how can I guide you or be of assistance? It's not my journey, it's your
Yeah.
journey.
But don't you still have to know what the pain is that they're suffering, or is that how
Yeah.
your process is by asking them
And
certain questions?
yeah, and talking about our stories and talking about our pain, talking about our trauma is difficult to do.
Yeah.
And it's usually the hardest part for most of us in recovery, is to talk about our pain, to talk about our mistakes, talk about our hurt and our suffering, right? And so everyone's journey and telling their story is their journey. So I might be ready, and the first time I meet you, to tell you my story, and it might take me 2 years to be comfortable telling you my story. But that's the part of the therapist journey, I guess, or my job. In my opinion, my job as a therapist is to build a relationship with a client, and that's the best way I can help them. I can, um, I can talk, we can have insight, and we can talk about a lot of things. We talk about experiences and emotions and feelings and thoughts and those kind of things, and we can learn a lot from that. I can talk about behavioral interventions where I would really, try this or try that, engage in this way or do this or that. But relationship is the most important factor in healing, in the therapeutic outcome. Because through relationship, we not only do we connect with another human, but we become accountable to another human. And if we're not accountable in recovery, then we won't recover.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you just nailed it. Accountability is like right up there as the number one, number two area, right?
Right.
Because we do have to take accountability for our actions. And then I would
And
also,
inactions,
and
actions
inactions,
and
yeah, well put.
inaction. Yeah.
Yeah. Because we've got so much self-harm that we've caused, the shame that we feel inside, the damage that we have done, just not to ourselves, but to people that we love and care about, right?
Mhm.
I mean, this addiction, this addiction crap, man, I have such a hard time with it because it affects everyone around them. I mean, everyone. It freaking it's like one of those scary movies where they're always looking for a host, right? And as soon as you get close enough, it's grabbing someone else and it's pulling them in, and it just
Right.
continues to build. And yeah, it's just a nasty thing. What are your thoughts, Brandon, on people who come to you, whether it's with addiction or not? Because those who do not battle depression or anxiety or addiction, it's hard for us to see, right? It's hard for us to understand because I lost a good friend. I don't know, it's probably been 8 years now. I get emotional even thinking about him. A very, very close friend, because he battled depression and he did everything he could just to try to
Mhm.
live a normal life. And he just finally said, enough's enough, and took some things to have him fall asleep, and he never woke up. One of my other friends, who all of us used to hang out, whenever he talked to me, was like, ah, come on, just get your butt out of bed and go out and enjoy life, and, you know, put a smile on your face. It's not that simple. Do you think it would be good to have family members who are part of this loved one's life to also sit down and have some therapy to learn how to speak the right way, or to not speak, let's say communicate, to communicate the right way, to help the individual? Because I think a lot of times what happens, especially in the addiction part, is someone could go through, I don't know, 3 6 months or so of therapy or recovery, and then we put them back into a family that still doesn't understand it. It's like putting them right back into that toxic box.
Yeah. Yeah. Environment is a huge factor of recovery. When I did a lot of work with addiction recovery, um, we would look at I would talk to clients about, risk factors and protective factors. When, okay, you're leaving the treatment facility and you're going out into the world, right? And so we need to look at what's your risks out there and what do you have to protect you. So um family and friends are the biggest and most important and influential protective factor, right?
Yeah,
So the more and more people we have on our team that are there for us, that we are honest with, that know our story, that know what our recovery plan is, that know what our triggers are, that know um, you know what's going on in my recovery story, then the better chances we have, right?
yeah,
Um, so having people involved in your recovery, people you trust, love, care about, and it takes a lot of humility for the person going through recovery to put their walls down that much and allow people to help them.
yeah,
But the more people we have on our team, the better our chances are of finding it to the other side of addiction, you know.
Yeah.
It's a long journey.
Oh, it's an ongoing journey, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it doesn't stop.
No,
It may not be as hard as it is at the beginning. However, it's still a long journey, something that you'll travel the rest of your life.
yeah, I think uh as you mentioned that, it kind of makes me, it reminds me of this, and I think I should bring it up. You know, for me, part of my story is the shame that I carried around for many, many years about being an addict in recovery. Um, I didn't share my story for a long, long time. Um, Particularly when I was going through graduate school and started out my career as a therapist. I didn't share my story. I was kind of ashamed of it. I was embarrassed, you know,
Yeah.
and I was worried that what would my colleagues think if they knew I used to be some junkie on the street, you know, like that doesn't sound appealing in a staff meeting, you know what I mean? So anyway, for the first, I don't know, 3, 4 years of my career, I kind of hid it, and I shied away from talking about it. Um, but I always felt like there's this weight on my shoulders, or not. I guess not a weight on my shoulders. I just felt like I was wearing a mask. I felt like I wasn't being my authentic self. You know, I was hiding, and I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I I was presenting at a conference in front of a bunch of colleagues, which I hate doing. I don't like speaking in front of people. I don't like doing this much either, but I'm here. And I'm a pretty private person. But anyway, I stood up in front of about 250 people at this conference, and I put a T-shirt on, and I wrote "I'm a drug addict" on the front of the T-shirt, and I wore it, and I talked the whole time in front of these people about, not about addiction. I was talking about therapy, and I was talking about other things, about and you know, other. And anyway, it was part of the reason I did it was to talk about this kind of therapy, about acceptance and commitment therapy, and how to we need to be able to accept and integrate all parts of us of who we are in order to be our true selves, right?
Absolutely.
And yeah, so if I'm going to be my true self for everyone to see, then I don't need to hide this. There's no reason, there's no shame behind it, you know.
And with you saying that, Brandon, it my triggers, right? My flashbacks came back. I didn't share any of my story until January of this year.
Mm,
Right. I started this podcast and the public speaking all based off of me being on the other side of my wife's alcoholism.
mm-hmm,
And a good friend of mine, Dave DeRocher, who works for the Other Side Academy downtown Salt Lake, met with me and basically told me how it was.
mm-hmm,
Said it was time for me to start telling my damn story instead of my wife's story, because that's her story to tell.
yeah,
And I like to say this because it's so true. My ego kicked in, and it's like, oh hell, you're not going to tell me this, no way. And then I realized he asked permission first to speak freely. I gave that man that opportunity, and I had to give him my utmost respect. Right, I owed it to him to listen to what he had to say. That
mm-hmm,
exact same day on my show, his assistant was my guest co-host. Our guest didn't show. She ended up interviewing me on my show. And I told
uh-huh,
my story for the very first time about my 8-year weekend alcohol and cocaine use.
yeah,
Because, like you, I was ashamed. I didn't want my mom to find out. I didn't want other family members to find out. I didn't want certain friends to find out, right? Because I had this persona that I had to pretend to be this individual that I wasn't, even though I wasn't at that time when I
mm-hmm,
told my story for the first time. I didn't want them to know who I was in my past. even though I shared like my anger issues and different things like that. But of course, we all know what it's like when it comes to drug and alcohol. That's taboo, right? Stay the hell
Hmm.
away from me. There's something wrong with you,
Right.
right? So it took so much weight off of me. As a matter of fact, Robin told me after the show, she goes, Al, the further you got into your story, I was just watching all this weight fall off your shoulders. I was watching you get lighter and lighter and lighter. And the reason
Yeah.
why she saw it so well is because she's in long-term recovery, right? She knows, she's gone through it. She
Yeah.
understands it. So and I think it helps for all our listeners out there, whether you're battling addiction or not, we're all battling something. And
Hmm.
if you say you're not, I'm just going to call BS on it, because we're all battling something, some worse than others. There's nothing wrong with going and finding somebody that you can build a relationship with, which, Brandon, you've touched on that. You've mentioned the relationship quite a few times during the show, and because it is
Yeah.
so important, right? You got to be able to build a relationship and trust somebody, someone that you can talk to and share, that's not there to judge you. They're there to lay the breadcrumbs out for you, to say, here, just keep picking up these breadcrumbs and you're finally going to get to a direction you really want to go. Because like you said, it's not your place and it's not my place to get someone to change, or uh, however, we can give them that opportunity, right? We can at least
Yeah.
lead them the right direction.
Yep. Yep. And yeah, and I've experienced this myself, and I've seen this with many of my clients over the years. And so I do believe that telling your story is empowering, and owning your story. It's my story, right? So
Yeah.
it's I'm uh but the timeline of when and how to tell that story is very personal.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I believe my time had just come that day. I mean, seriously, to me, even though it was during the daytime, however, the stars are still out there. The stars were lining up.
mhm.
And I got to understand a lot more that day, a little bit more about the addiction, and also, yeah, my wife's journey is her journey, and my journey is my journey. And we can do our best to at least be there to support and let them know how much we care. However, they're the ones that have to walk out of the house with the utility belt with the right tools, right? Because I
Yeah.
picture Batman, Batman had his utility belt, and it seems like no matter what situation he got himself into, he had the perfect tool or something to help him get out of the predicament he was in.
Yeah.
And I've even seen this with other people, where they get all these tools and they're putting in their pouch to help them in their recovery, but then they never pull them out.
Mhm. I laugh because I that's something I say to my clients all the time. I'll say that, you know, uh, what tool did you use in your tool belt? As we're talking about, change and implementing new habits and new behaviors, right?
Yeah, right.
What tool did you use in your tool belt? Well, I went back to the sledgehammer. Sledgehammer doesn't always work, does it? No, can't use a sledgehammer for everything.
Yeah, right. Was it a 5 pound or a 10 pound?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, and it's so true, right? Because I went through anger management in my early 20s. I went through 6 months worth of therapy to learn how to control my temper.
Yeah.
And I know what to use when I start feeling those blinders closing in, where I'm starting to get that tunnel vision.
Hmm.
I This is no joke. I literally start shaking because
Yeah.
it's scaring me, right? Because I know the direction, I know what's coming. However, I know what to pull out of my belt to go, okay, whoa, 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 I can put a stop to this. I've got
Hmm.
the power to put a stop to. I don't have to allow those blinders to completely close in on me. I can stop it before it happens. And if we don't use those tools that were taught to us, what good does it do anyway? I mean, what good does it do to be a carpenter and have your belt full of nails but no hammer to
Yeah.
nail nails in, right?
Yeah, and I think about that, kind of a metaphor for addiction, right? Like, I got a problem and I need to solve it. And if I go back to the sledgehammer, which is drinking or whatever, and I do that about every problem that I face, well, I'm just gonna have a bunch of smashed shit
Yeah.
everywhere, you know,
Yep.
because I keep going to the same tool to try and fix problems, but all problems don't solve with the same tool, man.
Yeah. Well, and also
That's
learning.
what addiction feels like, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And giving the tools to someone too to also take the accountability, right? Because that's hard, right? That's hard for us humans to take accountability for our mistakes. Because again, it's our ego creeps in. I mean, I really do think the ego is the huge part of that, right? Because we don't want to look at ourselves as making a mistake. There's a scene in one of the Rocky movies. I don't know which one it was, but the son is out there talking to his dad outside his dad's restaurant, and Rocky's getting ready to come out of retirement to have this other fight, and his son's
Mhm.
telling him, don't do this, and you're making you look bad and you're making me look bad. And his dad finally stops, and he has this saying that he says to him about, when it came time for you to grow up to be your own man, you did it. You went out there and you was taking on the world. But somewhere along the way, you started allowing people to point their fingers at you and tell them that you're no good and you can't
Mhm.
do this because of this person, or you can't do that. You didn't take accountability. You started blaming everything and everyone around you.
Yeah.
And he's like, basically, you're setting yourself up for failure every single time by doing that. If you open up your eyes and you take accountability, just like what Dave taught me that day, take accountability for what I did, the world starts changing in front of you at a pretty quick pace.
Yep. Yep. Part of the recovery process. Those inspired folks that wrote the 12-step book many, many years ago.
Yeah.
They had some good insights about recovery and what it takes to get better.
Yeah. Did you want to get your license, Brandon, because of what you went through? Did you just say, you know what? I didn't like
No,
what I went through and I want to help other people?
actually, when I was transitioning out of the military, I was actually going to go into law enforcement, and specifically, I was going to go into the FBI. I had applied with them, and I kind of liked carrying a gun to work and stuff. So I kind of got used to that. So anyway, I was finishing my degree in criminal justice, and I was about to apply to the FBI and try and go do training. Um, and this was a few months after I'd been done with my tour and was kind of transitioning back to civilian life. Um, anyway, during that time, a couple soldiers that I had served with had took their own lives after being home for 5 or 6 months, and so I went to a couple funerals and talked to a lot of my guys, and came out of there with a lot of questions. And more than anything, I was really pissed off. I was angry. I was really mad, and I was just mad about like how could we go and survive this war zone kind of experience and then come home and home be a more dangerous place to live in, man. I don't Just made me angry.
Yeah.
So um anyway, my anger kind of fueled my response to want to help and want to do something about it, and went and talked to the school and changed my major and took different classes, and graduated with a degree in behavioral or human behavior instead, behavioral sciences, and then went to graduate school.
Wow.
And I worked with the VA hospital. I wanted to work with the VA hospital, wanted to work with veterans, and I did that for many years. Um, I still love working with veterans and military first responders and those guys. but I got tired of working for the government, so I work for myself instead.
No, good for you. I probably would have done the same thing.
I
Cut
worked
the
for him
red
for
tape.
many years, man. Almost
Yeah.
10 years in service, and then enough government work for me.
Wow. Where do you see your life taking you here? I mean, you've been doing this for quite a while now. I mean, do you have
Yeah,
other things?
uh, I I just established this business. This is my office. I'm in Mulligan Counseling Services. A couple years ago, 2, 3 years ago, I started, and I've been working with out of state clients for the last 9, 10 years. They would come into the state of Utah to these different treatment, and there's a lot of treatment centers and stuff in Utah, and most of the clients I work with are from out of state. And anyway, the last 2, 3 years, I've been working in my community and connecting with my community, and I've really enjoyed it. It's been very rewarding to have a much better pulse on what the hell's going on around me.
Right, right.
So,
Well,
yeah,
getting involved with your community sure helps, right? Because they teach that a lot even in recovery, right? Doing a lot
yeah,
of volunteer work, getting yourself out there, because therapeutic wise, oh my gosh, it makes such a change in you.
yeah.
You know,
So, what's going on in the local high schools around here, and what's going on in the communities, and what's the issues and the problems that the police are having and those kind of things. So I'm starting to get into more of what's going on, and it's helped me be a better therapist for the people around here. So
yeah. Well, good for you for getting out there and out in the community and talking with people. Because I don't want to put it that way. I had something I was going to say, and then I'm like, no, that's probably not the right thing to say. It's just, I think it's good for all of us to go out there and give back in one way or another. And I started doing that, really being selfish to start. When I lost my job of 24 years, not knowing what I wanted to do, and starting to read self-help books and different things, and people started telling me, oh, start getting involved with different stuff, and if you do, your life will change. And
hmm
and when I first started doing it, I was doing it just basically, it's like, okay, what can Al get out of this, right? Not in a healthy way, though. I was looking at it in a different way. What can Al get out
yeah,
of this?
yeah,
Then I started doing it, and I started getting involved with the West Jordan Chamber, where I grew up
hmm
and where I live today. And I started getting involved with like golf tournaments and different types of dinners and galas and things like that, doing it selfishly. And it didn't take very long before I realized, oh my gosh, this is so freaking cool. This is
hmm
so much fun. And realizing what it was doing to me inside, it was completely shifting everything inside my guts that was just tied up in knots. It was untangling everything.
yeah,
And I got to where I started getting involved with, I had way too many things I was involved with. I mean, I was chairs and
yeah,
co-chairs and helping with this and helping with that, until I started doing my podcast stuff, almost 3 years ago. And then I went, okay, wait a minute, I got to start dropping some things, because this is now where my journey's going. This is my focus
hmm
now. What it did for me, though, in my life, and how it's changed me as a human being, I tell you what, man, it was worth it. And when I go out and do anything like that now, I don't have that same selfishness, because it's not for me, even though it's helping me, right? It's like somebody like you. You're out there, you're helping an individual, you're doing your best to help this individual get their life back. But also at the same time, I would think it's therapeutic for you, because it's therapeutic for me to have someone like yourself, Brandon, on the show, right? Because I get to hear what you have to say. I get to hear your journey,
hmm
and it's helping me. And a lot of the guests that I've had on the show who now work as certified peer support specialists or therapists, or
hmm
work in mental health or whatever it may be, they're they're like, man, I think I'm helping them. They're actually helping me more than I'm helping them.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and again, I just think that's the power of sharing your story, and it's it takes a while to be able to accept and own your story and understand it and comprehend it, um but there are many people that will love and help you through your recovery, you know. um I I was always amazed when I first started going to AA and NA meetings at, the love and support I felt in those rooms, you know, by strangers, people I'd never met in my entire life. Like, wow, these strangers really care about me, man. This is weird,
Right?
right?
Yeah.
And but anyway, yeah, just the selflessness of the people who continue to support recovery. Nobody has to do it in those rooms, you know. Nobody has to show up and be there, but that is uh yeah, the power of recovery is kind of a strength in numbers thing, I think, you know. um
Yeah.
yeah, the more and more people that you have on your team, the better chance you have of getting better. The more and more people that you share your story to, or the more and more people's stories you hear yourself, the better chance you have, you know. More people you can be connected to, better chance of finding what you're looking for in recovery. So
Yeah. Hey, amen. I'm looking forward to our second show today because I've got this young gal on. I spoke to her. Actually, my wife and I spoke to her a couple years back when she was really in the depth of her addiction. And she just recently reached out to me to let me know she's almost 2 years clean.
hmm
She asked if I was still doing my show. She's coming on today to tell her story for the very first time. And she keeps texting me. She's like, I am so flipping nervous. I've got rocks in my gut. I got the butterflies and uh, I sent her a text right before you and I came on, and I says, look at it this way. There's someone out there that's going to hear your story that you're going to make a change in their life.
hmm
And it's that simple, right? Because even if there's 1,000 people that listen to this show and only one person gets it, that one person is going to change another person's life. So it's just going to continue to grow.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's right. That's why I appreciate you letting me share my story, because it helps me to share my story, and I, as a therapist, I get to hear lots of stories, and I love my job. I love hearing stories, and you know, uh, it does it helps me, and I learn. I feel like I often learn more from my clients than they learn from me, but I don't know. I don't know how that shakes out. I don't know if it's a game, if we're keeping score, but I usually feel like I'm taking more from them than they take from me. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're probably right. It's definitely probably happening. Brandon, what couple questions. What would
Yeah.
you like our listeners to gain from this show and or combine them however you want to do it? What would be your main message?
Uh, Simplicity would be love and hope. Those two things, hope and love. You can't recover without those two ingredients. I just believe it, that you need those things. Hopelessness is a real difficult thing to overcome. So if people are feeling hopelessness, uh, then find a way to act to seek out love. And if you find love, then you might be able. Once you receive love, then you will be able to find hope again.
I
That's my
I love that. Now, I think something you and I will both resonate to really bring that love into our lives. I know at least it was for me. I had to learn how to forgive and love myself in a whole different way, not in a selfish way, right? when we can really care and love ourselves, the love that we give out
Yeah.
is so much stronger. And what's crazy is the love that ends up coming back to us is even more so.
Yeah, I like the words kindness and compassion, to have kindness and compassion for self. It's the key to healing and recovery of whatever you're healing and recovering from. I need to have compassion and kindness for myself. Life is hard. Life is difficult, period. Been through difficult things. I need to be kind to myself.
Yeah. Amen to that. So the name of your company is Mulligans or Mulligan.
Mulligan, yep.
Where the heck did you come up with that name? I mean, I know you're a golfer because I saw the golf balls on your wall, and I love the game myself. What got you to come up with Mulligans? And I have kind of an idea, so I want to see if I'm right.
Yeah, I love golf. You know, if I could have a life mulligan, I would be a professional golfer, you know. But yeah, obviously the word mulligan means to try again, right? An unpenalized retry. I messed up the first shot. I'm going to try again without a penalty. Obviously, you don't get mulligans in real golf or in real tournaments, but when you're playing amongst friends, you get a mulligan every now and then, right?
Right, right.
So yeah, a second chance, and I believe in second chances, and we if we are willing to learn from our mistakes, we will grow. That's what happens when you hit a bad golf shot. You try
Yeah.
again, and you oh well, I know what I did wrong, and you do it better the next time. That's the same way life works with anything. I learned from what I did, and I'm going to do better next time.
Yeah, you nailed it on that one, right? I had a good friend tell me quite a while ago, and I've really been working hard on implement it more. You know, it's okay to have tragic in your life. It's okay to have trauma. It's okay to feel anger and sadness and happiness and whatever. The trick is not to stay stuck there. Allow your emotions to go through those emotions. That's why we have them.
Yeah.
But also stop and look at it a little deeper, because there, I guarantee it, and I'm pretty sure I can use this word guarantee on this one. There's a lesson there.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just don't allow ourselves to see it because we're so caught up in the moment of everything. But allow yourself to go through those emotions. Once you've allowed that, sit back and start looking at what is the lesson behind it. And I tell you what, here in the past few months, I cannot believe the lessons that I'm figuring out of why certain things have happened to me.
Hmm. Yeah, I hear that a lot, and a lot with clients, and that that we're feeling hopelessness and feeling stuck like that. Um, you know, it there's hope, and um there's definitely um you know uh sorry, I lost my train of thought there. I apologize.
So we were just talking how the lesson is there behind it, and when you concentrate and look at whatever's happened to you, whether it's trauma or whatever, that's you end up learning that lesson behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, because learning is, in my opinion, learning is experience plus reflection, right?
Yeah.
So we have to have an experience, and we have to be able to reflect back on it. So we're going to go through a painful experience, and pain is inevitable. We're not going to avoid pain in life. We're not. We can't. It's going to come.
Yeah.
but but we don't have to stay in our suffering always. We often have choices to end our pain and end our suffering, um, and when we do that, we can come out on the other side and then look back at where we've been at our pain, and we can learn a lot. We won't learn much while we're sitting in our pain, but once we get through it and we can come back and look at it from the other side, we're going to learn an awful lot, and we're going to grow and change in many ways.
Yes, we are. Well put. Well, Brandon, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be on the show and share your
Yeah.
story and use your voice. I know for sure your story is going to help someone. If there is one of our listeners who's thinking about looking for some help and they have made a connection with you through the show, how could they find you?
Sure. My website is just Mulligan Counseling Services Mulligan Counseling Services.
Okay.
And that's an easy way to find me. I have a Psych Today profile as well, for Psychology Today. I sent those links to you, and you can send those out to your listeners if you'd like. But those are the easiest ways to get a hold of me.
Okay. Well, I will make sure those are on the show notes when the
Sure.
show comes
Appreciate
out. So if anyone's interested in reaching out to you, they'll have all your information.
Okay. Sounds
Okay.
great.
Well, guys, again, Brandon, thank you. Thank you to all our listeners, all our sponsors, all our guests, guest co-hosts. Again, guys, I say this every show. This show wouldn't be where it's at today if it wasn't for you. You guys are the ones that are making it all possible. It's not me. It's just a platform that I have. You guys are the ones that's making this a success. So thank you so much. And before we sign off, guys, don't forget to mark your calendars October 7th for the Healing Utah Success Summit at the Miller Free Enterprise in Sandy. So that's just about 5-6 days away. Mark those calendars because you guys are going to come out and hear some incredible speakers, hear some great inspiration, as well as get educated around addiction. Love to see you guys there. I'm going to leave you with this as we do at the end of every show. Remember, addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out.